All right, welcome to the Nervous System Training Podcast. Today we've got a guest on, Kent, um, pitcher in the Japanese baseball league. So this is very exciting. I've been looking forward to this episode. I know Quintin has been as well. So thanks for coming on, Kent.
No, thanks for having me. It's an honor. Am I guest number one for this, right?
Yeah, you're the first time
Yeah.
that we had. There's kind of with a caveat. We had
Okay.
one other time, and but this is the first time we've had a guest, me and Quintin together.
Okay. Well,
So yeah, we'll be figuring it out as we go. Like I said, we kind of do it on the fly, and we know what we're focused on though. So, thanks for coming on, Kent. And just for the people watching, give a little intro. What's your experience? Where are you at? And then we can start diving into the baseball and go a little deeper.
yeah. My name is Kent Tsujimoto. Uh, I played 5 years professionally here in Japan. I was born in Japan and then I was raised in the U.S. So I have, I guess I'm pretty rare. I understand both systems, the Japanese system and the U.S. system. And I played professionally 5 years in Japan and 2 years for the New York Mets as well, and a little bit of independent baseball as well in between. So yeah, now I'm retired. I have, my work has nothing to do with baseball now, but yeah, it's a life in the past, but yeah, that's pretty much where I came from.
Cool.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't know you played for the. You said the Mets.
Yeah, I played for the Mets for 2 years, and yeah, one
Oh,
year
okay.
in indie ball before getting picked up.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah,
Cool. Well, this is exciting for me. Baseball is my sport. I've played that. My first word was ball. I was talking about a baseball. So
right.
now I do the jiu-jitsu, and I actually just played a game. This is shout out the Bay Bears. I was in Seattle. I lived there the last few years, but I uh, joined a game with my old pickup team. So love the game. Excited to dive into it.
Nice.
You started talking about the systems, the American system, the Japanese system. Can you kind of explain the distinction? Like, what do you mean by these two systems? I know a little bit about what you're talking, but for people who don't know, what are you getting at with there?
So I think, well, when I say systems, I think it's very rare to be able to to have my experience where I grew up playing like very very strict Japanese baseball. We start pretty young at first grade, and it's very hardcore right off the bat. It's I mean, I hope we can show some footage here to kind of put more context into it. But and then and then after that, I actually was like a foreign exchange student, and I lived in Omaha, Nebraska. Actually, that's where I moved when I was in seventh grade. So it was like a huge culture shock, right? I went from the whole Japanese, like very very strict baseball system into like a very like Americanized like travel ball league system. So
Yeah, we have some
yeah,
baseball footage.
this is so I think there's not a lot of people that get the opportunity to do that. I feel like they just grow up just with Japanese, like yeah, like exactly like this system, and then going straight to like major leagues, and that's like their first interaction with Western baseball, or they like grow up in like American travel ball, and then like minor league system, major league, and then they come to Japan, and then they kind of experience the whole Japanese baseball system. So I feel like I don't know, I'm like a rare breed, I guess.
Yeah, there's stark differences in the intensity. What do you think is behind that? Like, why do you think it's a cultural thing or like a historical thing? What's like behind the differences in the systems?
Well, I think it's both, like culturally, Japan and US, I think is very, very different. Historically, I think a lot of it is rooted in like like martial arts, budo, bushido, like a lot of like samurai culture, that kind of stuff as well. So yeah, I think it. I think Japanese baseball and American baseball, I don't think can get any more different if like, to be straightforward.
Yeah, it's
Interesting.
I've always and so I mean I'm heavily entrenched in the American system. That's what that's what I was raised in. My dad's a huge fan. I'm an Orioles fan. Shout out, but what so I kind of have a feel for that. And from afar, like the Japanese system has always looked like it's like um very finesse focused. Like the it always seems like the contact is at a higher rate. The pitchers have more pitches, and more movement on their pitches. Like the finesse aspects of the game are at a higher level. Um, and the American side, it's more about like the power and um, bat speed, that type of stuff. And
Yeah.
is so I don't know. I've only got the one side of the perspective, but does that kind of check out with what you've got, the ambidextrous perspective?
No, I think you're exactly right. I think, overall, like I think Japan, I don't know if produces is the right word, but we come up with more consistent players as opposed to I think America is more for like outliers. You'll get that one guy that'll throw like I don't know, like 105 or something, right? As opposed to like Japanese pitchers, like you won't find a lot of outliers, but they're way more consistent, I think. Like, especially when it comes to like very fundamental stuff like let's say fielding or like making contact with the ball or anything like that. I think they're way more consistent with that because I don't know. I think it's just consistency in the drilling and like practicing mechanics as well. They're very strict about following a certain mechanic as opposed to I think Western culture kind of allows a little bit more freedom. And obviously there's good and bad to both, but that's kind of how I see it.
Interesting. When I was doing research, when I kind of went down this Japanese baseball rabbit hole, because I was a baseball performance coach for like 5 years, and one thing that I noticed is the intensity that they put into the game. Not just that. So apparently, when I was watching this documentary, that they have a lot of guys that will go through the same training camp. They'll be pushed in the same way, but they'll never see the baseball field, and they'll be a part of the cheering section. And they have a whole another protocol on how the cheering section should be, the intensity of their screaming, and sometimes they even get punished if they're not cheering or having enough like spirit for the team. Like
Yeah.
is have you experienced something like this?
No, that you're absolutely right. Like it's I mean, you'll probably see it in the footage, but there's a lot of like yelling, a lot of screaming. Like even before warm-ups, there's a lot of I mean, even stuff like this, right? It kind of brings like the spirit together. It's just something that you just don't see in Western culture. I don't even know how to explain it, right? It's just you kind of like sabotage yourself or you just go through this thing with everybody and it just kind of just bonds you together. It makes you I don't know. I guess there is something like that in the military, I guess. That might be like the closest thing, but yeah, it's just it's very intense. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I had one more idea, kind of relating to what Jake was talking about before on how it seems like the Japanese approach to the game is much more structured in technique, biomechanics, and drills.
Mhm.
Uh, and what do you think of this? Is because I wonder if when you look at like velocity, exit velo, and throwing velo, like a lot of it has to do with how much force an athlete can produce, like their mass times their acceleration.
Mhm.
And is the average baseball player, I imagine maybe they don't quite have as much mass as say
Mhm.
like the Westerners, like the average player's what, like 145 to 165 pounds,
I mean,
even through adulthood.
yeah, I mean, my pounds is and my feet
Oh, right.
obviously aren't that good, but but I'm like a little under like 6 feet. I'm like 5'11", And I was probably like maybe right in the middle, like when I played professionally here in Japan. And it, when I went to the minor leagues, I was on the smaller side for sure. Like you can count me from,
Mhm.
the lower side. So, and also like weight wise as well, I was like, I'm 75 kilos to 80 kilos. That's like a very skinny guy, I think, in the minor league system. So yeah, size is drastically different. I mean, but with that being said, I feel like Japanese players are getting bigger, like taller and like, bigger frames as well recently.
Mhm.
Compared to like, almost 2 decades ago or something like that.
Fascinating.
Oh yeah, you see that like a lot of this stuff too. Yeah, you pulled this up.
Yeah. Well, maybe we could well, since it's already kind of popped up, let's kind of go into what we're like seeing on the screen. That another thing that I kind of noticed with Japanese baseball is
Yeah,
uh like that kind of comes with the intensity, but also, there's been certain reports of I mean, I came across a report of a kid dying in practice, getting
yeah,
worked too hard, and
yeah,
like abuse and coaches abuse in the system and the athletes.
yeah.
I don't know how much that really happens in the system, but maybe you can kind of give us your own experience on this sort of thing.
Yeah, so I was born 1989, and I think I'm like the last generation who, we were like monks. Like we had to shave our head, like
Hmm.
like like and then like there were like subtle beatings and like you know what I mean. There's like a very like
Subtle
old,
beatings.
old there's like it was like an old school way of training. But I feel like anybody like that's younger than me is like just kind of grew up in a completely different environment. Like, because obviously, I think even the country, like Japan itself, kind of like came in and kind of tried to structure everything. They started to realize that it was that things were getting too like just getting over the top. Like kids were actually dying, or there were just too many troubles, right? So, but with that being said, I feel like that's why, like, even when I did play professional baseball here in Japan, and I would see kids that were younger than me, like they were very much more like less resilient to things that happened that were out of their control, if that makes sense. And then I think like the generation that I was, or people that were older than me, like were more resilient to anything that kind of happened, right? Like when it came to baseball or anything like that. So I did feel that playing baseball. Yeah.
Can you dive into the technicals a little bit? Like, what does the training actually look like? Like just from like a numbers perspective, like how many hours a week were you training growing up? How many hours, like, and what did that look like kind of transitioning into the professional level? And then of that time, like how much was spent hitting, fielding? Was it skills? Was it strength and conditioning? Was there running? Like what kinds of stuff
So
did you do? Um, and yeah, then we can like into the technicals of it.
I mean, to sum it up, it was just a shit ton of running. Like we ran a lot. Like it was, I mean, whether it be long distance running, short distance running, there was a lot of running. And like I'll give you an example. Like I was in grade school. I would be done with school at 3 p.m. I would bike to the station on my bicycle, and I would train like 30 minutes over to the because I played in like a pretty strict travel ball team growing up, right? So I would train like 30 minutes, and then I would walk to the stadium, and I'd start at like maybe 4 or something like that, and we just it'll be a lot of running, a lot of like what do you call that? Like just like I can't even remember the baseball terminologies anymore. Where you just like
Soft
get the
toss.
ball. Well, yeah, soft toss. Yeah,
Yeah.
soft toss. A lot of like grounders, like you get fed grounders, a lot of that. And yeah, just a lot of running. And I would be done at like maybe 8:30 p.m. that night.
Wow.
And then I would go home, it'll be 9:30 p.m. and I'd eat dinner, do my homework, half asleep, and get up, go to school. And I did that maybe like Monday, Tuesday. I think Wednesday was off, Thursday, Friday, and then every Saturday, Sunday was a game, right? It was at least it was probably like two games back to back, and we had to travel to another city. So we pretty much lived and breathed this shit. It was like it's pretty much, yeah, one day off a week. So that, I mean, to really give you like rough schedule, that's kind of what it looked like.
Interesting.
Interesting. Yeah. I have a question.
Yeah.
Now, when I was studying, I found a couple of YouTube channels where they kind of document some of these like institutions, like these academies, like high school academies that are built for athletes.
Hmm.
There's like these invite only, and their regimen is pretty intense. Like how like kind of how you described it. Like they wake up at the same time. Like I saw these kids. Like the first thing they do is they get on the scale to check their weight. The coaches look at what their weight is, then they go eat, then they shower, then and everything is regimented for them. And what I thought about, like if you tried to implement this in the West, there would be so many parents that would say this is abusive, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But when I'm
It
looking at
is.
well, let me ask you this: with a system that's because you obviously can't deny the results they get. With a system that's
Yeah.
that structured, that disciplined, that regimented, did you see a lot of mental health side effects with like your fellow, co-eds as you guys became adults? Like, was it really abuse, or was it just intense structure for greatness?
I mean, when I was actually doing the practice, it felt super abusive for sure. But
Okay.
looking back at it, but looking back at it though, I actually am thankful in a way that I went through a lot of that because it's helped me, like, with my career now as well. It builds like grit, it just builds that resilience in you in a lot of ways that you can't really get from only school, or you know what I mean. It's something that you kind of have to experience it, and I'm glad that I got to experience it within like a sport like baseball, where it's like a team sport instead of like an individual sport. Because I feel like we kind of all went through it together. So, even the guys that I grew up with as well, like I'm still pretty close with. Maybe it's because we all went through this shit together, and maybe that is like the bonding that got created. But yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of like positive side effects, I believe. And right now in Japan and maybe all over the world, but it's very hard to, like, I'm not advocating for all this, by the way, but I'm just saying that it's a very, like, even within Japan, Quentin, it's a very hard thing to do nowadays, like what I kind of went through when I was a
Okay.
child. Yeah. So
So it's like a different time. It's like
it's
now
a
they have a
different era.
different
It's
approach.
definitely a different era. Yeah, this is, yeah.
Okay, that makes okay. I have kind of a word for this, right? I kind of call it healthy trauma.
Hmm. Yeah,
You know?
yeah. That's
Yeah, I think it definitely
it makes
could.
sense. Yeah, yeah,
I have this theory too with like stress on the human body. That it's like the more you accumulate, you're always somewhat broken down, but it reduces the rate of like extreme breakdowns. Like the big injuries.
yeah.
Um, and I've yeah. So what have you seen with the injury side of stuff? We've been talking on this show about the prevalence of non-contact injuries
Yeah.
and across sports, really, at least American sports. Um, all that like the volume of baseball you're talking about is something I've never really experienced. I like every year I've always had elbow issues, shoulder issues. Like it's a tough sport, even at the lower volume I was playing at. But from the higher volume in that system, like what have you seen with the injuries in terms of frequency and intensity?
So first off, when I went to the U.S., I was so surprised at how many Tommy Johns go on, and like how many and how low the pitch count was. Like if you were to put like a pitch count to Tommy John ratio, I think it was. I don't. This is like anecdotal, but like it felt crazy, because I mean I had a conversation with Quintin before, and I was telling him, but it's like Japan has this like we this is back in my day, especially like now it's very different. I think it's more westernized, but yeah, nagekomi, this is perfect timing. So we have this thing called a nagekomi, which is like 200 plus pitch count like on the mound. And I mean, who does that in the US, right? Like you as a coach, you get fired if you have somebody throw 200 plus. But I've went through like I probably like 2 weeks in a row throwing 200 plus in a bullpen, like during spring training, like before the season starts. And it's kind of a weird concept to really like verbally explain, but what I think people or the Japanese, well, the reason why a lot of the Japanese probably started this was because they wanted to teach the pitchers how to throw with better mechanics by not explaining something verbally and just to kind of figure it out for themselves, but with the body. And they probably thought that if you not max out, but if you kind of make them just tired of throwing, 200 pitches in a bullpen, your body starts to kind of like maneuver itself and kind of like figure out ways to like efficiently use the body. And that's not something that you can kind of teach with drill, like, verbally, right? It's just something that you have to experience. And I never understood, coming like, I was more westernized than a lot of the Japanese people around me, and I never understood the nagekomi concept. But towards the end of the year, my career, I started to understand it because after going through these extreme bullpens, because I was like, holy shit, like pitch 200 felt way better than pitch 25, because I'm kind of like just going through the repetition and my body's like picking up these weird cues that like unconsciously, right? This is not conscious. It's like unconsciously picking up these cues. And I'm like, my body was becoming more efficient. So, I mean, it's not for everyone, I think, to be honest with you. But it is a method of teaching somebody efficiency as well. And I don't know where it originated. It might have been like a judo thing. It might have been like a karate thing. I don't know where this concept originated, but I think, hearing like all the coaches that lectured me about this, I think this is where it really comes, or this is what they're trying to do with these extreme pitch counts and extreme volumes.
Now let me ask you this: with this approach, that how do you say the phrase nagatomi?
Nagekomi.
Nagakomi.
Yeah,
With this Nagakomi approach to skill work development, did you see more kids kind of like break through the threshold of getting playing time, improving their pitching, or did this create more of a natural selection than say in the West, where
So
more kids like this Nagakomi kind of created only the strongest can rise through it, while the weaker ones or the incapable ones kind of like fell apart in this process? Or did it do the opposite? Did it kind of like help take an average guy and eventually he could become more elite? Did it produce better pitchers over time?
I think it did both. I feel like I
Okay.
think I don't know how to explain it, but I think it does both. Like again, like there aren't many outliers in Japan, right? So
All right.
I think everybody's basically, like everybody's kind of small. Everybody has to be efficient. Like you can't really, nobody has, not a lot of kids have like, there's not a lot of genetic freaks out here that could just, I don't know, like pick up a ball and start throwing 95 from day one. So I feel like this system breeds more the consistency, and then from there maybe some people fall off. But does that make sense? Like I think it does both.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I kind of get you.
Yeah.
Now, when you started doing like, well, let me ask you this: when you started working the Western baseball system, when you started working into the United States, did you feel a difference in your throwing arm compared to when you started pitching in Japan? Was there like techniques they were showing you, or different protocols you were doing, where you're like, oh, geez, I don't really, this is not feeling like how it used to feel when I was in Japan, or something like that?
Yeah, well, the mechanics are like back in my day were very 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 different, right? Like how they taught and just what they emphasized, I feel like was a lot different. I mean, like even back then, like I think US is more like a two seam fastball culture is kind of how I explain it. Like, they really emphasize movement. And in Japan, it's completely different. It's like a four seam fastball. Like it needs to really have a hard backspin. Like it can't do this. It can't do this. It just needs to go in a perfect line. And you need to be able to throw, like if you're a right-handed pitcher, you need to be able to throw on the outside corner of a right-handed hitter. And, you want to get that 8 out of 10 times. And that's like the golden standard for being a pitcher, right? So it's like a very different mentality. Like Jake, like, playing baseball, like, don't you agree? That's kind of like more of the,
Yeah, it's like a control versus chaos kind of thing. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like Japan really, really emphasizes that control part, and then in the U.S., I think it's a little bit more relaxed. This does depend on coaches, obviously, but
mhm.
overall, like generalizing between cultures, I think in the U.S., if you throw like a really you know,
Yeah, two seems my pitch, and it's just sort of
like a
let
real
throw it as
hard.
hard as I can and see what happens. Hopefully, the
Yeah,
more moves, the harder it'll be for me to hit it.
you don't have to hit the corners each pitch, right?
Yeah.
So, but in Japan, even if you're like throwing really hard and if you're doing movement, if you can't hit it like on both sides or like a lot, like you're kind of frowned upon, you kind of look like you're like the broken guy, that can do good.
Huh.
Would you say that like the Japan's system is more process oriented, and like whereas the American system, I don't want to say results, but more like moments, like the guys who deliver the big hit and the big moment, regardless of what training they had, regardless of what their preparation was, if they slept in, if they were out drinking, it's who delivers the moments first. In Japan, it's who's been consistent over time, who put themselves in the best position to succeed, regardless of the what happens in those moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like U.S. is, yeah, it's more result based, and in Japan, it's more process oriented for sure, especially in the amateur era. Maybe in professional, it kind of gets loosened up, but
Now, one thing that I think about a lot, because I was a big, like, Kent, do you remember old Pride FC back in like the early 2000s?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I really kind of learned watching like martial arts competitions from like Japan or China or Southeast Asia, like ONE FC is really big. And I noticed there's like a little bit of a different mentality with how the fans sort of appreciates the athletes and their expression of performance. Like in Pride, there would be guys like there was this one fighter, I think his name was Minowa Man. And
Yeah,
he was,
yeah,
yeah, he was not
I
a
know.
great fighter. He was a good fighter, but he
Yeah,
was not great. And he would sometimes get these matchups where he would just get destroyed. And
mhm,
sometimes he would actually pull it off and win, and sometimes not. But the fans
mhm.
always loved his spirit. They
Yeah,
always loved his
yeah,
heart, his will to try,
yeah,
even if it
yeah,
wasn't successful. And that actually
yeah,
made him more money with a losing record
yeah.
than a winning record, which is total opposite in the United States. And so I guess like my point is that also maybe a part of the approach to the game?
Definitely,
Like can you have the willpower, the efficiency, even if
definitely.
you're not the greatest hitter? Are you
Yeah.
a hard worker, a good executor?
Exactly. And I think the underdogs do get more cheered here in Japan than in the U.S. for sure. I mean, like, the Don Fry Takayama fight. Uh,
Yeah,
like Takayama was one of those guys as well, right? He was never like
yeah.
super, but he would go out there and just get beaten and get beaten and beaten, and he just keep coming back. And you're exactly right. Like that's very much true, I think.
Okay, interesting. Now, go ahead, Jake.
I was actually going to turn it to you, Quinn. I'm curious, like with the Marinovich systems, with the systems you've built, like when you're working with baseball players, I know there's several you've worked with in the past and currently. Um, what's your approach? Let's start with like pitching specifically. And
When I,
Ken, feel free to jump in if you're curious about stuff too. Like,
Yeah.
um, yeah, but yeah, just like Quinn, what are your how do you structure training baseball players, and what types of movements do you emphasize?
okay, well, with my system, like I kind of did a lot of things different than the traditional Western model. Like the traditional Western model is put everyone on the mound, whoever does the best starts, regardless of mechanics, regardless of, it's like who can throw the fastest, who can execute pitches well, and that's how they kind of figured it out. And so when they hired me to start improving their pitches, because I was more of an exit velo guy, they really wanted me to help them with their hitting. But when they were having shoulder issues, elbow issues with their pitchers, I started just filming all the pitchers in slow motion because I wanted to see like what their mechanics are, because baseball mechanics are really fast. It's like a split second to see, what's working good, what's not. And with my own understanding of injuries with MMA, especially shoulder blade injuries, trap injuries, bicep injuries, I kind of just start applying the same logic. Like usually it's athletes, like if you look at my screen, that when they throw the ball and their elbow can't be in line with or above their shoulder, when it gets lower, they always get elbow and shoulder blade issues. And I think a lot of that is because when the arm rises to this level, this pectoral minor, it's like a big fleshy part of the pec, really can kick in, can activate, and can withstand more of the kinetic energy that goes to the body. And then it can hit the bicep better, because these two muscles, the minor into the bicep, these are your braking muscles. They're supposed to take a lot of the force. But if it's lower than that, all of a sudden it puts the scapula more in neutral. It turns off this pectoral minor, and a lot of the kinetic energy hits this UCL in this forearm. And so I would just start filming the pitchers in slow motion and seeing where their elbow position was. Like that was like my main job, is to keep the injuries down. And so that, and also I would test their shoulder flexion extension. That was another big breakthrough that I realized when it came to guys. Like all the guys who had bad shoulder flexion, where I'd lay them on the ground, face down, they'd grab a pole, like a PVC pole, right? And with their face on the ground, they lift it as high as they can, belly down. And if they were below 8 inches, like 8 inches and lower, they always had shoulder and elbow issues. So a lot of that is just because the scapula can't slide and get the arm up. It can't get the arm up into flexion very well. So, we started doing things to start fixing like the serratus, fixing the shoulder blades, start working more on like the teres minor of the back and stretching out the chest, and reteaching them like to get their elbow up higher. And then every couple of weeks we'd retest shoulder flexion, shoulder extension, try to get them both above 13 inches. That's like a good like average for like a kid. If they get above 13 inches, usually their velo would go up by like 2 to 3 miles, and a lot of their shoulder issues would be heavily reduced. So that's how I kind of approach like the pitching. I was more like a longevity guy than trying to get the velo up, because we didn't believe that we needed good velo. We wanted good pitch execution. Velocity, that will, like, if you got velocity, great. But we noticed the more we try to get these kids to improve their velocity, the more the injuries started occurring. So we kind of abandoned that and just focused on longevity and pitch execution. Start getting more kids on teams, higher travel teams, and more kids in college with that strategy.
And then like, so let's say for instance that you notice issues with the flexion, and the PVC, or with the elbow height, what would be like the protocols to address those issues specifically?
Well, getting them on the ball we're training, especially on the glute ham, like getting them on the glute ham, start doing like shoulder throws, like or shoulder extensions. Start getting like the like reverse flies. Start getting the tissue more elastic and hydrated, so it can start moving around more. Because that upper back in between the shoulder blades, it can get really shortened and stiff. And a lot of times we would assess them. Like I'd have them take their shirt off. I'd have them do this with the shoulder blades forward and backwards to see how well the scapula is sliding across the serratus. And a lot of the times, these guys who have these shoulder issues, elbow issues, their scapula is not sliding properly. They have wing scap, or it's kind of dropping down a little bit. So doing things like serratus holds, reverse fly, palm up, and actually worked with a physical therapist down the road. For a couple sessions, teaching me how to evaluate like the shoulder blades, certain exercises like reverse flies with the shoulder blades protracted, palms up, palms down. And that's where I kind of came up with this drop shoulder routine in the program. And basically just getting the rhomboids, the lower traps, and the serratus stronger, getting the lat muscle stronger, but also lengthened. So a lot of intense like stretching and like pulse stretching of that muscle, because if this is too tight, it ruins your shoulder flexion and they can't raise their arm. So getting the lat more functional and strong and lengthened, getting the chest to open up, a lot of door frame stretching. Like we would put kids in the door frame and really pushing the connective tissue between the bones and the muscle. Like there's these cellular walls with the tendons that insert into the bones. We're trying to get those to kind of shift over so the tissue kind of has a little bit more freedom to express this flexion. And, just being consistent with it. Now, that doesn't mean you're injury proof. Because at the end of the day, throwing a baseball is not good for your arm. Like, to keep it 1,000, like this shit is not good for you. But it's awesome. So we do it. So the goal is, how do we keep the arm as optimized as possible to execute as many pitches before we get into breakdown?
And I'm curious, Kent, especially at the professional level in both the U.S. and in Japan, like what kind of training did you do aside from like baseball specific training? Like where did you go in the weight room much? You mentioned running, but like for shoulder, elbow, strengthening, I would call it like prehab, like
Yeah.
the rehab type movements. Yeah. So what types of strength conditioning prehab were you doing for pitching?
Yeah, so I mean, like generally speaking, in Japan, it is a lot of, I think, more long distance, more short sprinting running here in Japan more than in the US. And I personally did a lot of like, yeah, what you just said, like prehab, what they call prehab stuff, like a lot of tube work, a lot of external rotations from all different angles, a lot of like, what is it called? Serratuses, like a lot of these punches. I did a lot of like shoulder blade, rotator cuff exercises. And yeah, I had like a physical therapist at the team that would, yeah, what Quintin just said, like we'll take our shirt off and just kind of see the scap movements, because a lot of like impingement, a lot of that was very, very, it's just natural, right, for a pitcher to get. And like what Quintin just said is, it's just overhand throwing is just not, I don't think it's mechanically sustainable for the human body, especially I don't know, like throwing off the mound, like very hard, 100 pitch, like close to 100 pitches, like 20, 30 times a year. That's for like 10, 20 years. That's just from one side too, right? It's not right and left. It's just one side dominant, right? And I almost feel like under pitching can get away more with like softball pitchers can get away with a little bit more, but yeah, you just have to kind of, yeah, it's this, that's the sport. So we just have to kind of embrace ourselves and work around it. And yeah, that's kind of pretty much what we did. Yeah.
Okay.
Did you notice a difference between like the Japanese league and the American league with how they approached all that, or was it a lot of the same types of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, when I came to the US, like there's a lot more weightlifting stuff that was incorporated as a team. I feel like in Japan, it's more like an option thing where it's like if you do it, you do it. But a lot of Japanese baseball, now it's a little bit different, but in the US, it's like super common to have a, I don't know, like a bench press and a squat rack in your school, right? In your high school.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, because there's a football team, there's a basketball team, and everyone kind of follows the same, like squatting, deadlift, bench press, whether you play baseball, basketball, football. In Japan, it's super rare to find a bench press machine, or any kind of like machine in your high school. It's just you just do what you work with, and the only tools you have is your body and maybe like, I don't know, like a random pull-up bar somewhere or something like that to like hang off of. And so the only things that you can really do are like push-ups and you see what I'm saying? There's like, I think that was like a big difference that I noticed when I went to the US was there was so much equipment. Like it was like abundant, like it was everywhere that I went, right? Like there's a gym in every city that you can go to very quickly. There's a guy that knows like and all the coaches kind of grew up doing that system too, so they just kind of that's all they're going to teach, right? Because that's all they know. And in Japan it's like nobody like squatting was almost like cutting edge when I was growing up, because like, there's no gyms here in Japan. Like there's like a gold gym, I don't know, like somewhere in the city, but like these things weren't accessible, especially when I was growing up. Now it's more common, but when I was growing up, it was more uncommon. So we had to like just work with our bodies, and that's where, like, I don't know, like holding your legs up and like crawling or like push-ups or like that's the only shit that you could really do, right? And that's why I think a lot of running came into play, like. So yeah, that's pretty much it for strength and conditioning. Or like the major changes that I saw in strength and conditioning was that there's a lot of equipment, and it was like, all the gyms and all that was everywhere. So that was like the default program for everyone.
Interesting. One thing that I did notice when go ahead.
Oh, sorry. And just to kind of add, and I think that's why a lot of Japanese people get awkward when they do go to like the big leagues, or when they do go to professional baseball and they start like, doing bench presses and stuff like that, and they quit really quickly. Like I remember like when I played professionally here in Japan, like our team trainer kind of emphasized, like was trying to make us do this kind of stuff. And I remember like a lot of the players were like, dude, I feel weird doing this shit. Like I feel tight, like I can't throw right. And I don't know, like I think just because like if you didn't grow up doing it, you kind of question it, I think. But in the States, you grow up doing it, your dad did it, your brother did it, everybody bench pressed, deadlifted, squatted, right? So they won't really doubt that that's the reasoning behind a lot of like, I don't know, like mechanic issues or injuries or anything like that. If that makes sense.
Yeah. One thing I noticed when I was watching more baseball practices, I was just watching like a lot of them would film their practices and put it on YouTube, probably to like promote the program. And I was actually surprised how much creativity they put into their, not just creativity, but they almost kind of blend like a performance lens with their skill work lens. Like they'll put their cones out in a certain pattern to teach them the arc to run like through bases, like just the drills. And a lot of this stuff is pretty similar to like the kind of methodology Marv would implement, with speed and agility training, with like running cone patterns, with optimizing biomechanics. And in American baseball, at least in my experience, there was not a ton of that sort of work. It was kind of like a lot of, it's very, like you said, it's very loose. And a lot of times I see that the coaches sort of just wait for some of these outliers to figure it out. And they're kind of like now the example, like, hey, we got to do it like him. We got to do it like Diego. We got to do it like, player X, and instead of actually trying to come up with a way to improve the way they move, They kind of just say like, okay, this is how he moves. He's probably going to be second string while these guys are going to be first string.
Mhm.
You know, I just thought that was kind of like an interesting the difference in approach where they seem a little bit more, seem way more, not a little bit, they seem a lot more detailed in their skill work developments, which in the United States, I feel like it's not quite as detailed. Everyone has their own sort of expression.
Yeah.
I don't know if you kind of like recognize that yourself.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Ken. You said you've been watching this podcast. I'm curious, like what drew you to the nervous system training, like specifically for your goals, but then also like what from your experience do you think kind of like got you into the frame of mind where this clicks for you?
Yeah. So I think I'm kind of same as you, Jake. Like, I played baseball my whole life, like professionally, as well. And I retired when I was like 23. And, like my body didn't feel right if I didn't like work out or if I didn't do something with my body, right? Like I couldn't just like sit around and stuff like that. And I was always like going in the gym and like trying to get stronger and stuff like that. And then I found jujitsu actually in the last year. So I started doing jujitsu. And then when I started doing jujitsu, I realized I was like, I'm rolling with like a lot of these guys are like 40-year-old Japanese dudes and, or 40, 50-year-old Japanese dudes. And like, I was like probably physically the strongest guy in the gym, but I was getting thrown left and right. And I felt super slow as well. Like, I was like, holy shit, I thought I was like so strong because I never really skipped a year of training. Like, I'm actually probably in better like shape than I was when I was playing baseball. Like, that's how like seriously I took like a lot of weightlifting and a lot of that stuff. And then I started to realize I was like, wait, this isn't really adding up. And then that's when I kind of looked into a lot of these workout stuff. And then I ran into like, this podcast. And yeah, now that I've been kind of working this thing, like my speed is night and day different. And the way I think about everything is night and day different. And I'm kind of doing like this full circle as well. And kind of looking back at like, the things that I used to do here in Japan as a baseball player growing up. And I was like, wow, like, there were a lot of things that I was doing right, when I was young. And yeah, it's kind of a full circle moment for me right now at 36, being an athlete for, I don't know, maybe close to 3 decades now. So.
Interesting. So yeah, you've really hit every end of the spectrum when it comes to like this performance and like fitness sort of like journey.
Mhm.
That's pretty.
Yeah.
It's pretty far.
Yeah.
I got a Japanese baseball question that I thought about. Now, American baseball, we're real big into like getting into fights, right? Like we will like for some reason American baseball and American hockey, where like if teams get pissed, like we'll just start punching each other, like no problem, and the fans love it. Like it's kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Is that a thing in Japanese baseball? Like, because you guys seem so disciplined. There seems like there's such like a strict hierarchy of structure and respect. Does it kind of do the wheels come off every once in a while and people just start throwing punches?
I mean, there are. You don't really see it that often, but there's definitely a lot of like shit talking in the dugout. A lot, like probably more. A lot of shit talking in the dugout in Japan, more so than in the U.S., but more physical brawls, I think, in the U.S. If that makes sense.
Oh,
so you don't really see the brawls, but you'll like I remember like the first time I was sitting in like the Japanese baseball dugouts, and I was like, holy shit, there's a lot of like shit talking here. Like like the players are like yelling like the whole time, just like at each other. And like this happened like pretty much every game, and I was kind of thrown off by that. Yeah.
So and the coaches, it's kind of like encouraged by the coaches, like they don't no problem with
that.
Yeah,
the coaches are pretty heated as well. So I think like whether it's shit talking or a lot of physical fights that happens, I think it's a worldwide thing.
Wow. Fascinating. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And Japan, like, or a lot of Eastern cultures, right? Like not only Japan, but Korea as well. I believe in China there is, but there's a lot of like age hierarchy. So if you're like 2 years older than this guy, like and you went to like the same school, it's like, God and peasant kind of thing. It's like you really have to show, like you see a lot of this bowing stuff, right? In Japan, like you can't like they take it to the extremes too. Like you can't drink in front of the guy, or like, there's a lot of like this hierarchy power play thing that goes on, especially in baseball, because it's really important which school you went to, and which school you graduated, and like who your like upperclassman is from that school. And like I don't know how to explain this whole thing, but there's a lot of that. So you can't really pick fights with everyone in that sense, because the guy that plays on your team, his older guy is on the other team, and he's like the coach. So like you can't physically have a brawl, but you'll kind of like talk shit. You'll just leave it to talking shit instead of like having physical brawls, if that makes sense. So
Yeah. Well, one thing that I also wanted to bring up when it comes to Japanese professional baseball, in comparison to MLB, is that they have this like international baseball tournament. I think it's called like the WBC or World Baseball Championship, right?
Yeah.
World Baseball Classic.
Yeah.
And I was like kind of looking at it over the years, and it looks like Japan has been really strong contender year after year after year, winning it, if not getting really close.
Yeah.
And that also was kind of look into, well, it's kind of interesting. It's up in the background where a lot of Japanese baseball players don't really feel the need to go to the MLB.
Right.
Where they already make a ton of money in what's the league called again? The professional league?
NPB.
Yeah, they make a ton of money in NPB. They get a lot of social credit for it. They live a good life, and they don't really feel the need to go to the MLB and indoctrinate themselves in a new system when things are already looking good in Japan. Is that something like other pros would kind of talk about? Would you, like, amongst each other, would you be like, I don't really want to go to America. Like, I'd rather just hanging out here. I can find a girlfriend out here. It's going to be way harder in Japan. Things like that.
Right. Yeah, of course. I mean, Japanese baseball, like you said, is, it's a very like high status thing to be in. Even if you're in the minor leagues, you get paid very, very well. Like I was surprised, like my salary was super low when I played minor leagues. I think that's the story with everyone. And you also have to work in the off seasons, right? If you play minor league base, like if you're in like single A or rookie ball, right? You can't, unless you signed a really fat contract, you're pretty much looking for a job in the off season, and then training, and then doing your season. As opposed to in Japan, even if you're like the lowest tier draft guy, you can pretty much live just by your salary. You kind of get treated like a local celebrity. So it's a completely different atmosphere. And like you said, like I think a lot of Japanese people are also scared to go to the US because it's culturally very, very different. And I think Japanese people feel very comfortable here in Japan, whether it be the food, the culture that they're already used to. And I think they have this image of American baseball as well, that people get swapped out very, very easily. Like, you'll see, I don't know, like the starting lineup for the Dodgers this year, and then you'll see it the year after. It's complete. It's like a whole new team, right? As opposed to in Japan, I don't know if you'd see the Tokyo Giants in 2009 and then see the Tokyo Giants in 2016. It's not that different. There's like 2-3 guys maybe swapped out, but there's a lot of like, shortstops that play for 15 years, or a catcher that'll just stick to one team with 15 years. And that again is gradually changing here in Japan as well, but it's still very much alive, like where I think we're more conservative in that sense. And I think the fans appreciate that kind of team as well, right? Like they don't want to see this, even if he's like the best shit, like they don't want to see a new player in town every year. They kind of want to see this homegrown guy that they drafted, that that played on this team for so long. So yeah, there's I think that's kind of how I would sum it up.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Ken, I'm sure you've played 25, 30, maybe more years of baseball in your life. I'm curious, what's the most fun you've ever had playing? What's just what was the best seasons, the best time?
Best moments. Well,
Yeah.
the best moments, I'll be honest, I was hurt most of my career playing professionally. And I think that's why I probably know too much about like training and strength and conditioning, is because I spent so much time rehabbing, right? And so I don't know. I think the best, like the most fun I had was in the US, though, probably. Like I'd have to say, like playing in middle school, like when I moved from Japan to Omaha, I had a lot of fun because it went from like, monk style baseball to like you can chew a gum and during a game, right? It's just like it's completely different thing. So I remember like having a lot of fun playing baseball in the US when I first started. I had a lot of fun playing like independent ball right before I played for the Mets. But unfortunately, I was hurt the whole time, like pretty much my whole career in Japan and for the Mets as well. So, yeah, I guess those were the two like highlights of my baseball career.
Now, in little league Japanese baseball, is the word "fun" ever used?
No,
No.
I think never.
Yeah.
No one. I
So
mean, the Japanese are notorious for not knowing how to have fun as well, right? Like even with like work, everything. It's just, everyone's so hardcore, and there's just not a lot. I mean, I wouldn't say zero, but definitely not as much as the U.S. Like, yeah,
that now looking at as sort of like a spiritual sort of thing, how it sits in like the human zeitgeist of Western baseball and Eastern baseball. That is one thing that we do kind of. It's even in like our constitution, like the pursuit of happiness. Like we emphasize like enjoyment of what we try to do with sports. That's a
mm,
thing coaches
mm,
say. Like you remember hearing that, like, say, hey guys, let's have some fun out there. Let's
mm,
like you
mm,
do a good
mm.
time.
Yeah,
Like we
yeah,
definitely want
yeah,
to win. But
yeah,
I remember in the documentary in like with Japanese little league baseball, or maybe more like high school, this one kid got like kicked in the face by his
yeah.
coach because he screwed up on a play and cost him the game. And there was a reporter there, a Western reporter, and he interviewed the kid. He's like, "Hey, aren't you going to do anything? Aren't you going to say something?" And the kid's like, "No, I'm actually
Been on
glad that I got a chance to learn the lesson from such a great coach." So it's a
No,
totally
seriously,
different mentality, where it's like
totally
not this is
it is.
not fun. This is like this
It
is
is.
like what is your life worth on this field?
Yeah. No, no, and no, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Because like when you said, because you hear American coaches all the time, like, "Hey, let's go out and have some fun," da da da. Like that never happens pregame here in Japan. It's more like, what are you gonna die for? Like, like
What
let's
are you
go
gonna
out.
die for?
No, like don't like it's a very like shame based culture here in Japan, like or in Asia, pretty much, right? Like so, it's like
Yeah.
don't shame this team or like don't bring us down, kind of like that's more of the pregame here in Japan. So it's like completely different vibes.
Yeah, you also said another thing that I thought was really interesting, where you kind of made like a joke saying like how, like I was like asking you to describe the difference between Japanese baseball and American baseball, and you're like the first reference you brought up was like, have you ever looked into North Korea? And I was like, no, like yeah. And so when I was exploring more into this, one of the behavioral characteristics that I noticed was the grieving process to losing in Japanese baseball.
Yeah,
Where it did kind of remind me of when the dear leader of North Korea, when he died, there was people like crying in the streets and like getting hysterical with their grief. Then I saw these kids lose this big Japanese baseball tournament. I can't remember what it's called. It's like their biggest one.
Koshien. It's the high
Koshien.
school baseball tournament. Yeah, it's
Yeah, and
that's a wild one. Yeah,
yeah, and the kids that are losing, they're like on the mounds just
yeah,
crying and losing their mind. And I was like,
yeah.
huh.
Yeah.
I'm kind of, and it's encouraged. Even the audience, like the crowd,
Yeah,
is
the audience
crying.
are all balling out. Yeah, and they're like taking home the sand of the stadium. That's like a big thing. You didn't see clips of that? Like they're taking the sand of the field to like as like a memory or something. It's like,
Wow. That's. Let me
yeah.
ask
I
you
mean,
this.
they literally put their life on the line. They're like throwing 200 pitches a game, and like, because this is a drop down tournament. Like you can't, like a knockout tournament, right? You can't lose. So like the best pitcher is throwing 8 games in a row. Whether it's 200, like whether he threw 200 pitches the day before, he's coming out the next day. So they're like, and the whole school traveled to the stadium, and you'll like, I don't know if you've seen clips of this, but like, they got like the whole row of cheerleaders and like, trumpets and drums and like all the moms and dads and like third cousins and like
Like a
everyone.
holiday.
Oh, the whole town is there. The whole, yeah.
Yeah, and well, let me ask you this, Ken, if you don't mind sharing in on this.
Yeah.
Did you ever have to go through this grieving process, and did it feel real? Did it feel ritualized? Did it feel peer pressured, or were you just not like you never ended up in that situation?
So you could probably tell by just speaking today, but I'm too westernized to. I was probably too westernized as a kid to take that in.
Okay, yeah, okay.
but so I think that's kind of why I got treated as like, I was Japanese, but I was kind of treated as a foreigner as well, like, because like I saw that, but I understand it. I understand it very well, but like I never got into it that deep, like personally. I was always I kind of looked at it from like with like a step back, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was kind of curious about. Is it, it seems like
Yeah, because I knew both cultures, right? If I didn't know,
right.
like, I went to what's called an international school here in Japan. So all my studies were in English. And, my mom is half German. You know, she brings a lot of that, like, she's not pure Japanese. So I understood both cultures. So I was kind of like, what's going on here? But if I grew, like, my dad's completely Japanese. So he was like super hardcore. So like if I didn't have that side of me though, I would have definitely like like that's the only thing I know, right? I would have definitely been.
You had been taking sandwich home at the end of it. Yeah.
For sure. And yeah.
Wow. Jake, did you have any other instructor?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about martial arts a little bit.
Yeah.
Just the I'm curious your impression of you touched on it earlier in the conversation, but I'm just wanted to ask about it specifically. Like, what impact does the Japanese martial arts culture have on the way the game is played, the way the approaches to the training, and then I'm also curious. Like you mentioned, you did jiu-jitsu. Now I'm wondering if you did any martial arts while you were doing baseball of any sort, and yeah, just
So yeah, I've never done anything but baseball. That's the only sport I ever did. I mean, I didn't have time to do anything else, right, growing up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much all I did. I always loved watching jiu-jitsu, like or like even like, Pride, all that. I love watching all that stuff. So I don't know, that was kind of what led me to jiu-jitsu. And then like after my first day of going in the gym and sparring, I was hooked. So that's pretty much how I ended up doing this. But martial so I don't know if martial arts is the right word, but we call it bushido, like the way of the warrior, is what's like directly translated. And I think you're gonna have to fact check me on a lot of these because I might be speaking out of my ass. But before World War II, like everything in the military that was like ingrained, like whether it be the training, like any kind of regiment came from samurai like regiments, right? So it was like pretty much like what like the way of the samurai was translated directly into the military. And then right after World War II, everything kind of fell apart here in Japan, and there was no outlet for this whole culture that went on for so long. And I think that whole culture just got pushed into like judo, baseball, all the sports. Everything went into like athletics because there was no military, right? After World War II. So everything just got shoved into sports. So I would say the origin of Japanese sports itself is just Bushido, like way of the warrior. Like it's just straight samurai. Like that's where everything comes from. All the mentality, like all the Miyamoto Musashi books. Like if you read that, that's straight like Japanese baseball. It's like 1-to-1. Like everything comes from there. And then all the training. I wish I would have brought some more footage, but there's this thing called bunny hops where you kind of wear like these like peg sandals, and you like strap your hands behind your back and you just like bunny hop like on the stairs. That's like a straight judo move that all the baseball guys did growing up. There was like a brief video that you saw. There's a hitter called O Sadaharu. He's the guy that broke Hank Aaron's home run record. He hit like 800 home runs. So he would swing a samurai sword, and there would be like a piece of paper that would be going down from the roof, and he would like slice it, and like he could kind of and then there was like a teacher that like he was like a Bushido teacher, I think, like, and he can tell like by the line that he cut this paper in and how his swing was doing. And I can probably, I don't know, like insert some images of this, but there's like image of him like, because he's been doing.
Can you spell out his name? I'll try to pull something up.
So Sadaharu, Sadaharu, and then his last name is it's OH. And then maybe write like sword swing or something. I don't know if that. Sorry, I've never image searched this in English, but
because I remember seeing that too, where the piece of paper would be hanging on a string, and it'd just be like, wouldn't be like, and
yeah.
I kind of like studied the sword stuff.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
Yeah. Did you see the pile of paper that he went through though? Did you see the pile of paper that he cut through though? That or like the tatami, or the tatami mat that's like just shredded because he's just kept doing this. Oh yeah, this thing right here.
Yeah, because it's hard cutting paper like that.
Yeah,
it's just some insane stuff.
So I mean, yes. So origin of Japanese sports. I mean, not just baseball, but is just, I think, samurai culture. Pretty much, like the mentality, everything, right? Like, and I think that's where like the die for your honor thing and all that thing kind of originated. I'm sure it got lost in translation somewhere, or I don't know what like all the intents were, but I guarantee you that's kind of where that's where the origin comes from, though, for sure.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, because I also dove into like the history of Japanese baseball. So apparently, baseball was incorporated into Japanese culture before they even had the word sport in the Japanese language.
Mm-hmm.
So baseball was technically, everyone says baseball is American pastime. Like Japanese pastime is like they took it to another level. And post World War II, they, you got no outlet for this kind of expression, like when you have no military. So you're like exactly what you said, all of that, because that's what they did. Like during World War II, the pilots would shave their head. They would, there's a lot of similar sort of rituals and traditions post-military, and now baseball kind of took on that spirit. So fascinating stuff, man.
No, for sure.
Let me ask you this, Kent. If you were in your opinion, it's got a little controversial. In your opinion, who does baseball better on average, the Americans or the Japanese?
That's a great question. I think for the amount of people that participate in the sport of baseball, I think Japan maybe produces better, higher average. But I think there are more outliers in the U.S. for sure, though. I've seen some kids like in the minor leagues that were like holy shit, like, like you played like football all your life and you picked up a baseball like 3 years ago and you're sitting 98 and like you don't like and I saw or like you'll be in rookie ball and there'll be like three kids hitting 101 and it and that just never happens here in Japan, right? But from a consistency, from like a winning and consistency kind of thing, like and from like a player ratio to consistency, I think Japan probably does the best. And then I think you have to kind of throw in Latin players here as well, Quintin, meaning like all the Dominican players, the Cuban players, and the Venezuelan players, because they're a different breed as well. I think they're like I almost feel like they're like in between Japanese and the U.S. I almost feel like they take the best of both worlds to an extent.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Wow, man, it's been really, really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kent, before we wrap up, I was just curious if you had any questions about nervous system training for Quintin, if there's anything that, like for your own training or stuff that you would have wondered when you were a baseball player. No worries if not, but I just want to give you the opportunity before we wrap.
I mean, I've actually honestly got a lot of questions, but Quintin, like if you were like, say you had a kid that wants to play like baseball,
hmm
sorry, let me frame this another way. I kind of wanted to ask your take. Japan, if you play baseball, you're only playing baseball from like first grade to college. You're not doing any other sport. And I feel like in the US, like, me growing up in Nebraska as well, it's like in the winter you can't even walk outside, right?
hmm
So it's like you physically can't play baseball in the winter. So like it's like baseball is almost like a summer sport. You're playing baseball and then like you're playing football, soccer, or you're wrestling or something in another season. So you're playing like a lot of kids play multiple sports in the US, right?
hmm
And as an athlete growing up, like with the nervous system and everything, like as an athlete, what would you advocate for? Like, would you hone in on the skill like the Japanese system where you're just doing like one thing, or would you have like a kid try to like wrestle during the winter, play tennis in the spring, or you see like or like skateboard on the side? Like what? Like how do you look at that? I've always been interested.
So what I lean more towards diversity to create a better outcome for one goal, because like
Mm,
just based on my experience working with I call them like someone who does one sport their whole life. I have like a phrase that I use. I call them like a soccer kid, or they're a baseball kid, or they're a wrestling kid. Like this is just what they do. They do this one thing. And I notice on average that they do
yeah.
progress in that sport better, but they're more prone to burnout, and they're more prone to overuse skill work
Mm,
injuries. The same repetitive thing over and
mm,
over and over again with no diversification. And there's definitely an average for
mm,
every kid you see on TV that's doing really good in a sport. There's like 100 kids that kind of like were just as good but fell apart either through injury or burnout. And couldn't quite like cut it.
mm,
So I think for the athlete's mental
mm,
health, I would trade a little bit of progression for more athleticism and more diversity into their body. Because then it gives them something else to
yeah.
chew on. It keeps the friction down, and in the West, it may be more appropriate because I imagine when you're when you're like a 13-year-old Japanese boy, you're not really like telling your dad to go f himself. I don't want to play today. I
No,
don't see that happening.
no.
I think he's just gonna beat your ass.
Not
But
not
in the
not in the
United
East.
States, yeah. But in the United States, you could probably get away with that a little bit more, and the ass
Yeah,
beating isn't going to be as bad.
yeah,
So
yeah,
there's always that friction between like the kids and how they feel and what the parents want, and also like the coaches want. I think if you diversify, it reduces that friction for the athletes. So, and
yeah,
I have also seen kind of like how you said, where if you're a really, really good athlete, if you have all these different soft quality skills that have been flexed and expressed through a bunch of different things, You know, like I've seen kids who haven't played a ton of basketball, but they're really good athletes, and they show up in the basketball team and they just start destroying. You know, or in football,
Yeah.
you know, or in baseball. They like, you know, like this one kid, he was like a soccer player, right? A really good soccer player, really great athlete that went to my high school. His name was Adam Gentile. He ran a 4.6. He was just a stud muffin. Then his
Right.
senior year, he joined the football team. He started as wide receiver, had the most rushing points than anyone else, had the most. He averaged like 21 points a game. Like,
Right.
now, is he a freak? Yeah, he's a little bit of a freak, but he
Yeah.
was also a really, really good athlete.
Yeah.
You know, so I think if you have that athletic base that's really high, you can easily transition into other sports and still dominate. You know, more than just keeping on one sport, because the
Gotcha.
room for something going wrong on just one sport is a lot higher than a diversity of sports. So
Gotcha.
that's how I'd
Gotcha.
approach it.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's perfect. I mean, I like, but I have 3 kids and I always think about, my kids and, their athletic career. And I'm not like trying to make them into pro athletes, but I always want like have them to have a great athletic background. Because like if they
Mhm.
have it, like they can use it. If they don't, it's so hard to build. It's not impossible, but it's very hard to build like once you're an adult, right? So I think I kind of want to like give them the more options than not. So I just
Yeah.
wanted your input.
Yeah. I got one more question before we wrap up. I know it's getting late for
Yeah.
you, Ken. I'm sorry. But I want to know,
No.
like, because you're in Japan right now. Like, what city in Japan are you living in?
I live in
What's
Kobe.
Kobe? Okay.
It's
Oh yeah, yeah, because the beef.
So Kobe, yeah.
Yeah.
The beef, yeah,
What
exactly.
is
Yeah.
what is going on with Japanese MMA? Like, where did it go? Where is it at right now? Like, what are the people interested in? Because I have not seen a real. It used to be huge in the early 2000s, and now it's
Yeah, it
kind of
used
been
to
like
be
underground
huge. Yeah, it used
forever.
to be huge. Yeah, so I think there's been a lot of like scandal related things. I think when it was with Pride, and a lot of like TV productions pulled out. I think a lot of like because TV is still big here in Japan, right? It's not like a
Yeah.
YouTube online thing. I feel like so. And a lot of this Pride, a lot of MMA, it happened in New Year's Eve. I don't know if you realize this, but like the
Right. Yeah.
huge
Yeah.
fights all happen because that's where like 80%. It's like our Super Bowl. It's like the toilets all get like all the plumbing system gets fucked because like everyone goes and takes a piss at the same time. Like everyone's watching TV in New Year's Eve here in Japan, like eight or it used to be more, but like so that was like the huge money making thing. And now that there's a lot of scandals, like all the sponsorship pulled out, and I think that was one of like, and I think when that happened, it kind of fell off, and there is kind of like a small, it kind of became smaller, became more like a like YouTuber thing now. I feel like there's a couple YouTubers that are trying to like I don't know, like Mayweather fought this YouTuber guy a couple of years ago, and like
Okay.
like you know what I mean? It like shifted off into something a little bit more different. As because I love those like Pride days; those were like the best, like days in mixed martial arts here in Japan. But yeah,
Are there
now it's
still guys like? Are there still MMA gyms? You know, working the system, working on guys. You know, trying to get into the UFC. Is that community still like working hard at it?
I mean, yes, but because I don't know how it was back in the day, so I can't really speak. But I don't think so. I don't think not as much, not as hard as it used to. Even all the boxing gyms, like the
Hmm.
boxing gyms, were so hardcore here in Japan. I think in the '90s and in the 2000s, and now that's kind of toned down as well. So yeah, a lot of the fighting scene has I feel like kind of died down after yeah a lot of the money pulled out, right? A lot of the big sponsorships pulled out, I think.
Do you think it has anything to do with like if you go down that route as a combat sport athlete, sooner or later you're going to have to start rubbing shoulders with the yakuza?
Uh, sorry, Quentin, you cut out. Can you say that again?
Oh, I was saying, like, do you think a part of the reason it's not like developing like it used to? Because if you go down the combat sport route, sooner or later you're going to have to kind of rub shoulders and bump fists with the Yakuza.
Maybe. I mean, it's it's something that I think everybody knows at this point, right? So
Yeah.
I mean that might be something that's in the play.
Okay. All right. Well, it's been really fascinating stuff, man. I'm really glad we got a chance to kind of explore this whole different world and approach towards sports and culture. It's
Yeah,
really fascinating to see how other nations and other cultures are doing it, and it kind of is eye opening on, because in the United States we tend to think we do it the best, of course, because we're Americans. And when you see
Mhm.
these other systems, work, you see these other camps, these other academies. It's just so like it's like wow, man. There's so many different ways you can skin a cat and also get different, if not better,
Yeah,
results. So it's been. I really appreciate
yeah.
you dedicating the time and sharing your story on your experience with this.
No, I appreciate you guys having me on. I've actually never done this in public, but I always do this privately with like people that I know, and they're always amazed at like, how different it is, right? Eastern and Western and stuff like that. But I still feel like US is cutting edge though on a lot of these training and a lot of these protocols. I feel like, but at the same time there's so much stuff that's outside of US that has never kind of like, had any kind of like light shined on in the US, So, yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kent. Thank you,
Yep.
Quintin. Thanks everybody who is watching along with us. Please remember, like, comment, subscribe, and we will stay coming back with more content.
Yes, sir. Thank you, guys.